Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Nice to see you again. We are exploring the connection between water and coastal life. We are studying all kinds of coastal life: octopus, whales, dolphins, eels, otters, clams, turtles, snails, all kinds of sea life and a coastal life. And we are reading a lot of nonfiction books to learn. These aren't a story about things, and they aren't how-tos about things. These are nonfiction teaching books. They teach us about an idea. So if you were looking at the front of this one, I wonder what you might guess. What might you predict this book might be about? You can use your picture powers. You can use your reading powers to sound things out, your pointer powers to help you sound things out, your word wand to break up big, long words. Like, let's do this one together. Skeletons. Let's read this title together. I see pictures of, it looks like a coral reef with some fish. There's a scuba diver. This book could be about scuba diving. But since we've been talking so much about animals, I bet that Miss Dunn is showing this one because of animals. So I'm going to guess it's something to do with life on the coral reef. So now let's take a look at our title. Sponges, rainbow word, you know it, Cameron knows it, are skeletons by Barbara Juster S. Benson. Illustrated by Holly Keller. I recognize Holly Keller's name. She illustrates a lot of books I've read. All right. Ooh, this book is old and well loved. Look at these illustrations. Nice job. Ooh, we have a chart. Sponges are skeletons. Look at this. A picture and a label. Red finger sponge, red vase sponge. I wonder if that's because it looks like fingers and that one looks like vases. Azure vase sponge. Azure, I think, means the color because this was red and this was red, and azure must be this color. Pink tube sponge, green barrel sponge, and purple tube sponge. They all have color names in them. Pink, green, purple. Look at all those sponges. That is a great way to teach. They drew pictures and labeled them. So now we know what all those different kinds of sponges look like. Bath time! Time for water and soap. And a sponge. Do, 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 do. A sponge is especially good for washing because it holds more water than a washcloth. A sponge is full of holes and tunnels. Ooh, imagine you were tiny and you crawled around in there. That could be a cool adventure story. A sponge is full of holes and tunnels. The water goes into all the holes and all the tunnels until you squeeze it out. Squish. Pick up the sponge. Now plunge it underwater. Watch it fill up. Whoog, 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 whoog. The sponge is heavy now. Can you feel how heavy it is? Squeeze it. Sploosh, splash, dribble. What kind of words are those? What kind of words? Sploosh, splash, dribble. I bet you know it. Onomatopoeia. The bathwater rains down on you. Do you ever do that? Do you guys ever use sponges? When you squeeze a sponge, you are squeezing the soft skeleton of an animal. What? This animal once lived in the salty waters of the sea. This is coastal life. A sponge from your bath is coastal life. What? You have a skeleton inside your body. We know that. We learned about that in October. It's made of hard bones. How many? You know it. And it gives your body shape. The skeleton that is a bath sponge is made of a soft material called spongen. This soft skeleton gives the sponge its bumpy shape. There's our skeleton and the cat skeleton and the fish's skeleton. They're all vertebrates. We all have backbones. This does not have a backbone. That means this one is an invertebrate. sponge is an animal that lives in the sea. But sponges have different, but sponges are different from many other animals in two important ways. First, a sponge cannot move from place to place to get its food. Sponges grow attached to rocks, other animals, even shipwrecks. That's an interesting fact. That's cool. What an adventure. Second, sponges do not have special body parts like most animals do. A sponge does not have a heart. It does not have a mouth or a stomach. Sponges do not have lungs to help them breathe. The water they live in brings them everything they need to stay alive. It brings them food. It brings them oxygen. What? Imagine that. You're just literally swimming in everything you need. No wonder they suck it all up. When it was alive, the sponge was almost round. Its soft skeleton was covered with a skin that looked like leather. Like leather boots or leather purses. This skin was filled with holes. The holes are called pores. I've heard that word before. I've heard it when people talk about their skin. We have little pores in our skin, and leaves have little pores in the bottom called soma. Somata? I have to come back to you on that. Pores are very important to a living sponge. When the sponge was alive, it pumped seawater through its thousands of small pores. Tiny plants in the water were food for the sponge. The food and the water moved inside the tunnels and the chambers in the sponge's body. That's how it eats. It's the same way it soaks up the water. Look at this great diagram. They drew a beautiful illustration and they labeled it. Pores. You see the tiny holes? Then the water was pumped out through one or more large holes. The food was left behind, kind of like how the whales do with their baleen. They grab a big old mouthful of water. The sponge grabs a big old mouthful or tube full of water, and then they push out all the water, but they keep all the food in, just like the whales push out all the water, but keep the krill in. Remember in their baleen, we read about that? The sponge acts as a filter. It feeds on the tiny plants and other things that are in the water. The sponge helps keep the water in the ocean clear and clean. Cleans our body, it also cleans the ocean. That's pretty cool. And look at that diagram with all those beautiful labels. Water, water and food. That's cool. Nice job, Holly Keller. Sponges do not look like animals. For many years, people thought they were plants. Divers do an experiment to show that the sponge is an animal that can pump water through its body. What did they do? What do you think they did? What do you think the scientists did? How did they prove? They said, hey, it's not a plant. Watch, it's gonna pump food through its body. But the food's so tiny. You should pause the video and you should think, how did they do it? And you should write it down and then you should see if it's right. And if it doesn't match this one, you should write a story or create an animal that goes along with what you predicted. Divers do an experiment to show that the sponge is an animal that can pump water through its body. How did they do it? They put colored dye in the water at the bottom of a tube sponge. In only a few seconds, the colored water, what do you think it does? It shoots out of the top. The sponge has pumped the water through its body. Look at that. Achoo! Thanks for the food, guys. That's pretty cool. The holes in the sponge protect many sea animals that live in them. Oh, cool. Pistol shrimp, small fish, brittle stars. We just read about brittle stars in our starfish book. Tiny crabs, we read about those in our shell book. And lobsters all find safety inside a sponge. Sponges are homes to all these animals. Scientists think that sponges have been living under the seas for 700 million years. Whoa, that's a long time. If you could dive into every ocean in the world, you would be able to find some kind of sponge growing there. What? That's cool. That's a fun fact. Look at these little guys. Nice illustrations, Holly Keller. She did a good job. Lots of details. You can really tell the texture of the different sponges. And you got lots of details on the shrimp. Little pistol shrimp. Oh, look, here's another diagram. Sponges have been given different names. Sometimes the name describes the way a sponge looks. Elephant's ear sponge, moose antler sponge. Like they labeled them. I bet you could have guessed which one's which. The one that looks like moose antlers is the moose antler sponge. The one that looks like, it kind of looks like a bathtub, but we could go elephant's ear. I'll take it. And they did a diagram and they labeled it with a really nice detailed illustration. Often the name tells us how the sponge feels on your skin when it's wet. Oh, when it's wet. Wool sponge, velvet sponge. Oh, okay, so those are two different sponge types and how they must feel on your skin, woolly and velvety. The softest sponge is called the silk sponge. Can you imagine how this wet sponge would feel on your face? Ooh, I bet it feels so soft. Some sponge skeletons are made of small glassy needles instead of soft spongin. That would not be good to wash your face with. No, thank you. That sounds terribly uncomfortable. Your bath sponge has many relatives under the sea. Underwater sponges all seem to be the same soft blue color. But using lights, divers have seen blazing red sponges. They have seen bright yellow ones. Some sponges are glowing purple. What? Others are brilliant blue. What do you hear? Brilliant blue. Brilliant blue. What is that? Most sponges lose their color when they are brought to the surface and die. We can see their living beauty only in pictures the divers bring back to us. You can only see them in their own habitat. Once you take them out, no more. Sponges come in different sizes and shapes. There is a sponge no bigger than a bean. One sponge grows to be so large that a diver can climb inside it and peek over the edge. What? Instead of having a sponge in your bath, you could have a bath in your sponge. What? That's funny. But how is he breathing underwater? That doesn't work. No two living sponges are ever exactly the same shape. Every living sponge looks a little bit different from every other one. Some sponges live to be hundreds of years old. Most things we call sponges today were never alive. They do not come from the sea. They come from a factory. In a factory, sponges can be made out of rubber and other materials. The factory can cut the material into thousands of duck shapes or fire truck shapes. All of the duck-shaped sponges will be exactly alike. All of the fire truck sponges will be exactly alike. Many people would rather use a natural sponge than a rubber sponge, especially for bathing. Sponge fishermen bring up our bath sponges from deep in the ocean water. Greek sponge fishermen come to Tarpon Springs in Florida came almost 100 years ago. They found sponges with soft skeletons on the ocean floor off Florida's west coast. West coast is the best coast. All of the sponges harvested in the United States are taken from these sponge beds. All of them from one place, you guys. Most of the divers are members of those first Greek families. Whoa, still in the same family. That's interesting. That's a fun fact. Sometimes divers must go as deep as 100 feet to harvest the sponges. The sponges are harvested with hooks. They are loosened from the bottom of the ocean and put into big nets. Then they're brought up to the deck of the boat. I wonder why they use a net and not a bag. Why do you think they use a net instead of a bag? Imagine Imagine you were one of them. Imagine it with a bag, and then imagine it with a net. And imagine it with a bag again, and then imagine it with a net. The sponges are piled on the deck and covered with wet cloths. The sponges die and their skins rot. The smell is terrible. Woo! The fishermen wash the sponge skeletons clean. Then they string them up to dry. They look like huge necklaces drying in the sun. Later, they are cleaned again. Now, the sponges are ready to be used by painters or car washers or any cleaning job. But your bath sponge is cleaned many more times to make it much softer for you to enjoy. Sploosh, splash, dribble. Time to squeeze a skeleton. Have a good bath. What is sploosh, splash, dribble? Teach a friend or a teddy bear. Find out more about sponges. How much water does a sponge hold? That's a cool science experiment. Paint with a sponge. Ooh, I wish I had you all together. I have sponges for painting. All right, you guys, I can't wait to see what you guys study. Maybe somebody will teach about sponges are skeletons. All right, talk to you soon. Bye, guys.